In this video, we take invigilators through the centre-specific arrangements which they will need to be aware of prior to an examination series. These arrangements can only be confirmed by the centre based upon the circumstances in which examinations are taken. Invigilators must be made aware of the following when preparing for an examination: the centre starting times for morning and afternoon exam sessions, the centre arrangements for a supervised break for candidates who have exam papers timetabled within the same session or which have been moved to a later or earlier session within the same day, and the resources which the centre will provide in the examination room and the materials which the candidates are expected to bring with them for an examination. Confirmation must also be given for the following: the centre process or arrangements for managing the use of calculators, and if replacement calculators are to be provided by the centre for candidates to use if needed, whether invigilators are expected to support the setting up of the exam room and the process or arrangements for inviting candidates into exam rooms and the role of invigilators in this process, and the centre method for summoning assistance to the examination room. At the beginning of an examination, invigilators must be aware of the centre procedure for verifying the identity of all candidates at the time of the examination, any senior members of centre staff who will be or are likely to be present in the exam room at the start of the exam, and if so, what specific task or tasks they will be performing in the exam room, and what action to take if an unauthorised person enters the exam room. To manage the beginning and the end of the exam, invigilators will need to be aware of the centre policy or arrangements for unauthorised items that may be brought into the examination room, food and drink in the exam room, and where candidates' personal belongings and any unauthorised items which have been handed to the invigilator are to be stored, and confirmation of the invigilator announcement which is used by the centre at the start of each exam session, and the centre policy relating to a 5-minute warning at the end of the exam and whether this will be given to candidates or not. During an examination, invigilators will need to be aware of the centre policy or arrangements for dealing with candidates who arrive late, the actions an invigilator is required to take, and the information which must be recorded on the incident log. The centre arrangements for when and who completes the attendance register, and confirmation of whose responsibility it is to warn any candidate being disruptive that the awarding body will be informed and may decide to penalise them, which could include disqualification. During the examination, invigilators must also be aware of the centre procedure for dealing with an emergency evacuation of the examination room. They must also be aware of the centre policy related to candidates who may have finished the exam early and whether they are required to remain in the exam room for the full duration of the exam paper, and those candidates who need to leave the exam room temporarily and whether time is given to compensate for temporary absence, and if so, how is this recorded? Invigilators will need to be aware of the logistics relating to access arrangements. For example, if a roving invigilator is to be employed, invigilators will need to be aware of the centre arrangements for undertaking and recording the activity of the roving invigilator. If candidates have been granted a supervised rest break, invigilators must be aware of the centre arrangements for the supervision of and the recording requirements for any candidate permitted a supervised rest break or breaks during an examination paper. Where the exam room also accommodates candidates not granted supervised rest breaks, invigilators must be aware of the centre arrangements for how these candidates should be permitted to leave the examination room at the end of their exam without disturbing a supervised rest break candidate or candidates, who must be allowed to carry on uninterrupted for the necessary additional time. And if 25% extra time has been granted, invigilators will need to be aware of the centre's rooming and seating arrangements for these candidates, Where the examination room also accommodates candidates not granted extra time, invigilators must be informed of the centre arrangements for how these candidates should be permitted to leave the examination room at the end of their exam without disturbing an extra time candidate or candidates, who must be allowed to carry on uninterrupted for the necessary additional time.